Buying and selling businesses is the business hack that no one tells you about. So if you want to step through that door too, then do me and yourself a favor and subscribe to this channel. And if you've built a brand, sell the brand. This is the Brand Exit Podcast, where we guide brand builders through the M&A industry. If you want to receive the full value of your life's work, you're going to need a team of specialists. We cover brand value. To meet the rest of your team, the best place to do it is in person at the Acquisition Collective event. That's where we'll be, and we'll see you there. Today's episode is with Danny Smith. Danny has this unmatched hustle and is a weapon for anyone on that buyer side. And that's the theme today. We got him on the buyer side and me on the sell side. But what you'll find is we're not so different. Buyers become sellers. It's a loop. What are you doing this for?
Yeah.
We play the game to finish the game. That's the game.
The reason why I wanted to sell was because I wanted to level up.
It's the dread of wanting to start again, but you're just not the same beast.
I got like a fast track from here to here simply by being acquired.
You've graduated from a founder to an entrepreneur.
There's definitely wrong times to sell.
So what's the wrong time? Let's go into that.
When it's too late.
Yeah.
But you want to be getting companies on the up. The ones that are coming down, those valuations are going to get impacted massively. You might already miss the boat.
It's not the end. People think it's their identity rather than an asset.
Does every business need brand?
When you have a brand in a boring industry, you're a lighthouse in a village. No one cares if they've got a Visa or MasterCard, but everyone wants. If you could have American Express Black, brand is, we're for you, we're not for you, we're not for you, we're not for you, we're not for you. If you compete on price, it's the race to the bottom. And the danger is you might win.
Those that control deal flow control the market. If I had two companies, one has a brand, one doesn't have a brand, the one that does have a brand is much more appealing to me. But I'm also interested in businesses that don't have brand yet.
There's a tension between buyers and sellers. The people that buy, they're not passing it on to their grandkids, they're selling it.
If they've got 2, 3, 4, 5 acquisitions all within the same kind of ecosystem, they can start to align the branding across all of the companies, which then creates a much more powerful brand, so that then if they wanted to exit, they would sell that group as a whole.
This next wave is so much more keyed into building personal brand, but is it harming the business brand?
I think that every business should have its own brand, but I also feel like every founder individually should have their own personal brand, because there has to be something next.
If I'm a founder and I want to sell my business one day, what are the main things that you think they should do?
The most important thing is...
This episode is sponsored by Edgar Home. Designed in Berlin, their lamps are more than just lighting, they're atmosphere. With soft mornings, warm evenings, and a quiet touch of elegance that endures. I've had mine for over a decade, and it remains timeless. Explore the full collection at edgarhome.com, and in paid partnership with the Brand Exit, one subscriber will be selected to receive a complimentary Edgar lamp. Good luck.
Danny Smith, aka Dealflow Danny. Who better to talk to than a young entrepreneur who's started a business, sold it, and is now building a brand. So today we're going to focus on preparing to sell. So what do you do when a big fish comes and says, we want you? How you create buyer and seller networks, and how you create demand, because nothing else matters unless people want you.
So they say.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously people being willing to sell is the lifeblood of the industry, and I'm more interested in when people don't want to sell.
Yep.
Why is that? Because are they not prepared themselves?
I mean, I think the thing is with brand, right, is I think it's one of those things that people don't know it exists until it's there. So especially small businesses, you know, I think it's almost like a taboo topic to talk about brand, because brand can't be really valued, right? It's not something that's properly tangible, or at least that's how it comes across in the first instance. So I think some people stay away from building any kind of brand. But as soon as people start putting into brand, there's almost like a point of no return, or at least I think anyway. You know, if there's a business that does have some sort of presence about it and some sort of thing about it, then the people that run that business all of a sudden instantly understand what brand is.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Exactly.
So it's kind of like something where people that don't put into brand, they don't understand what brand is.
Yeah.
And because they can't get any value from it, then they're not really that fussed about it. So I almost feel like, or at least in my situations, is the companies that do have a brand almost fell into it and almost accidentally discovered, oh, this is something that we can monetize.
This matters, yeah.
And then they start pumping into it once they kind of like almost accidentally see the value in it. But that's what I find anyway. But there's a very clear difference between the two. So like, just from me sitting on the buy side, for example, you know, if I had two companies that I was looking to maybe buy, one has a brand, one doesn't have a brand, but other than that, they're pretty much identical, like same, let's say same revenue, same everything across the board, but one has a brand and one doesn't. The one that does have a brand is much more appealing to me, because really what I'm looking for in a brand is also that reliability and that credibility that comes with a brand. Whereas the one that doesn't, you know, is, I wouldn't say it's more risky of an investment, but it's one that does have a brand feels like much less of a risk. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And if valuation is forward looking, then how did you create those numbers in the first place? And what's the promise that they're going to make them in the future? That's where I feel like the brand element really shines through when it comes to M&A.
Yeah, I think so. You know, I was looking at, in fact, I was looking at a company yesterday, and it was a solar company, and it's been going for about 10 years, and it was really, really well known, but you wouldn't actually think the financials would match with the brand. So actually, the brand made it look like a bigger company than what it was. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But again, because of that kind of dynamic, from my perspective, I thought, well, I can actually use that brand and almost leverage that to maybe bolt on some other companies that actually behind the scenes have better financials, but can almost, you know, leverage off the back of this brand. So yeah, so brand is always a really funny one because, like I say, it is something that on face value is quite hard to value and to make something that's tangible. But, you know, it's something that can make a business much, much more appealing from a buy side perspective.
Yeah. And so that's demand. So
100%.
That's 100% the reason that they wanted you and not them.
Yeah.
You know, that's the key to that. But what about when you're finding that when people are contacted in the first place,
Yeah.
why do they not sell?
Why companies don't sell? I mean, there's more reasons why companies don't sell than do sell. Mainly what it comes down to ultimately is the numbers, is ultimately what it comes down to.
In that, so when they're not prepared to sell, do you feel like, I've heard this term a lot, golden number.
Yeah.
So they're trying to reach that golden number where they feel like in 5 years I'll get to this number and therefore I can retire and
yeah, it's
I
always
wanna keep
something infinite that people are chasing.
Yeah,
always. And I don't think that, not that number's never achievable, but once somebody reaches XYZ goal, you know, if they do reach it in, let's say, 3 years, whatever, and they achieve every goal that they've said that they were going to achieve, once they've got it, then they're like, oh, you know, we'll do another 2 years or 3 years or whatever, because things are going really well. But I mean, realistically, there's no right time to sell. There's definitely wrong times to sell, but there aren't necessarily right times to sell. You know, I think
there's one. So what's the wrong time? Let's go into that.
When it's too late.
Yeah.
So like for example, speaking to a marketing company a few months ago, they were doing around about 100 grand a month in sales, and they were like just on the up, bang, 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 every month on the up. And one of their core employees, I don't know the whole ins and outs of the situation, but one of their core employees left the business. But when they left the business, like all of the clients left with this one employee.
All right.
So I think what happened is they set up their own company and then like undercut their previous employer. But they then went from a 100K a month company to, I think it was like 30K. And then they were trying to look to sell because they had all of this stuff that was going on and the business became too much. And they were just like, we just want out, we just want to sell. And it's like, at that point, it's not that it's too late, but from an investment perspective, from an investor looking at that company or an acquirer looking at that company, that company is now on the down.
Yeah.
You want to be getting companies on the up, or you kind of want them stagnant, but you can see the potential. But ones that are coming down, those valuations are going to get impacted massively.
If you want to own your craft, whether it's visual content, creative direction, or media coaching, check out OYC in the description below.
Yeah, and I suppose you've got a limit as an owner. There's a certain curtain call where you're taking it as far as you can go.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of that. I think if you're going to build a business solo as well, there always seems like there's some sort of ceiling. Obviously, every ceiling's different for each individual person, but there always seems to be some sort of ceiling that people hit, and then the company will sort of plateau. And then I suppose at that point, it's a decision of whether the owner wants to get out or if they're happy there. Again, absolutely sweet. So I've seen that situation too, where the business is just been plugging away for the last 5 years. Doesn't really need much input from the owner. They're happy just to hold it and keep it. But I mean, from my perspective, I'm just like, well, try and cash in your chips now whilst you can, because eventually something's going to happen. And if you're not in a position where you can action that, then you might already miss the boat.
Yeah, I suppose it's a thing that people don't quite recognize, is that it's a liquidation event.
Yeah,
everything that you've put in, depending on how much you own it, of course. If you've had investors, then they're going to be looking for a liquidation event as well. But it's just that kind of cherry on the cake, finish that well.
Yeah.
And like what you're doing, you run a business and then you can start again. And I know there's some contractual things around that, but that doesn't take away from what you've learned, your level of ownership, some of the people that you've created within your network.
Yep.
So it's not the end, I think people think it's their identity rather than an asset.
Yeah, 100%. I also think that sometimes, and again, this is kind of my experience actually. There's different kinds of brands. So obviously you've got your business brand, but I also think that everyone should have a personal brand too. I feel like that's really important. And what we were talking about earlier, where sometimes you don't realize the value of a brand until I've got something there. So I've experienced that, really recently, with my own personal brand. The fact that I've kind of got one, I say I've got one, compared to whoever, but there's something there where people kind of, not that they want to work with me because of me, but that I've kind of developed my own little personal brand of people that I know, like, and trust, which is separate to any kind of company things that I do. So the companies have their own brand and they do their own thing, and I've also got my brand. But if for whatever reason, said company and I go different ways, I actually then end up taking that personal brand with me, which is now, moving on to what I'm doing now, has actually held me in really good stead into what's next and onto the next thing, which I think is also really important.
Yeah. Well, let's use that as a segue. So let's go over the deals engines exit. So what happened there? What was life like before the exit, during, and after?
Yeah. So I suppose a little bit of a backstory. So I've always been self-employed. Like, I've always done my own thing ever since I was like 17. I've always run my own stuff. I've always been like the captain of my own ship, if you will. So I kind of almost naturally fell into marketing. Well, actually, I was actually a personal trainer, was my proper background, but I'm not built like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So the kind of my clientele was like 70-year-old women. Yeah. And to be fair, it was actually really good. We just used to go on walks and we just used to chew the fat. But in terms of like what I wanted from my life, I was like, surely there's more than this.
Pick a niche.
So I almost like accidentally fell into marketing from my personal training background. So I ended up running a gym with me and this other guy. And this other guy, he was like action man. He still is. And he was like fitness forever. So we developed a dynamic where he ended up just training the clients. And he was like the personal trainer for that gym. And then I became more of like the marketing director, sales director of the gym. And then that's where I kind of like really got my passion for marketing in the first instance. Because we ended up quadrupling sales, and then we ended up becoming like one of the biggest gyms in the area, which was a really good kind of, I enjoyed that. So I ended up taking some freelancer roles kind of at the side. Before I knew it, I was earning more doing this freelance stuff than I was in my own stuff, which was great. So then cut to, as I built that out, we ended up being like a somewhat generic marketing agency, which then transitioned into a LinkedIn prospecting agency, which then transitioned into specifically working with business buyers in the M&A space. And then what happened was an M&A...
Is this under the label of Deals Engine?
So this is all way before Deal Engines. Okay. So this is all the lead up to Deal Engines. So then what happened is we got acquired by an M&A advisory, who, with M&A advisories, the way that they work is they're very heavily reliant on things like closing fees and deal fees, which you totally get. But they were looking for something that was more like monthly recurring revenue, just to steady their cash flow, which is cool. So, but then I also saw a really cool way for me to kind of see behind the curtain, if you will, see how these M&A advisories work and how deals actually get done. Because I was always on the peripheral, I suppose. Like, I was good at finding the deals, and then what became Deal Engines was good at finding the deals. But I always felt like always a bridesmaid, never the bride. I'm seeing all these deals happen, which is amazing, but I was never really part of them. Which is now kind of like segued into kind of what we're doing now, which is where we're really on side the whole way through the process, and we're actually partnering with clients now as well. So we don't really have clients, we've got partners, which is a cool way of looking at it. It's like a really different dynamic. So instead of just taking retainers for the sake of taking retainers, we've actually got partners and we've got vested interest into what they're doing. So it's been a real journey.
Well, that brings us back to when after you've sold the business, it's not it's an asset, it's not your identity.
Exactly.
And then the next time you do it, you improve. So what were you've went over some of them, but what were the main improvement points that you went over from the last business?
So the beauty with the reason why I wanted to sell in the first instance wasn't because I necessarily wanted to exit. It was because I wanted to level up, if that makes sense. So I thought, I've got my business, which says is here, but then this is this other business that actually wants to acquire me, but actually they wanted me to stay within the company, but they're, let's say, here. So I kind of got like a fast track from here to here simply by being acquired. But then what was involved in that role was really simplified, because all I was doing was the sales in that aspect. So I just kind of almost got a seat at the table. I just focused on the sales, but whilst that was happening, I actually got to see the whole process from start to finish, and what was involved in that, and how these deals actually get done. And I mean, it's a rabbit hole. Really, when you start looking at this stuff, it's just infinite. The amount of routes and creative strategies that you can look at to get these deals done. It's just crazy. So to be exposed to that, it didn't necessarily feel like an exit. It actually felt like a reinvestment into what it is that I wanted to do.
I suppose that's you mentioned rabbit hole, if we use an Alice in Wonderland type structuring. So this is actually why I got into it, was that selling your business, for me, it was one of the things that you finish well. What are you doing this for? We play the game to finish the game. That's the game.
Yeah.
You win it. And so that part where, the sell the feeling, not the product.
Yep.
That feeling, as soon as I cottoned on to it as an industry, I was like, I need to be involved with that. I need to go and help founders build their brands and businesses, but moving to that next level of brand with a capital B. Yeah. And then finishing it.
Yeah.
That was the reason I got into it. Why did you get into it as a no one comes from the background of M&A, really?
No, we were talking about this earlier, weren't we? So so my qualifications, if you will, are all in sport. So I had no intentions of getting into this originally. So I sort of fell into it almost by accident. So we were working with a business buyer, and this is like really in the early days before we were specialising in M&A. But we were working with this business buyer, and we helped them to buy 23 businesses in 18 months. Now,
that's massive.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Now, what we were doing at that stage is we were kind of just breaking the ice, I suppose, and getting these seller conversations moving. it was the client that actually got the deals closed. But I mean, that was a real light bulb moment for me, because I was just like, whoa, they've just bought 23 businesses in 18 months.
Yeah.
Like, how are they not imploding as well? Like, how are they actually doing this? So I actually had a really good relationship with them, and then they sort of gave me a little behind the scenes and a little snippet of what it might look like. So that's kind of like where the real interest peaked. Like I say, when I had that M&A advisory approach me, I thought, this is how I can get a real kind of seat at the table and a behind the scenes look at what goes on. So yeah, so that was like how I got into it.
And there's another part where the people that buy, they're also sellers.
Yeah.
People that buy businesses,
They're not in it
because
they're
not holding it until they're not passing it on to their grandkids. They're selling it. So it's a weird. I suppose that's a little weird zone where you think there's a tension between buyers and sellers, but and there is in the negotiation. There is, sellers want a what's the best way to describe it? Bidding war.
Yeah.
And buyers just want one.
Yeah, they want a frenzy.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's interesting, the midpoint. And I had to understand this. My heart was with the seller side, and then I was like, buyers are sellers too.
Yeah.
And that's where again the brand type of thing comes into it. Is when you're looking for something, you're looking for the brand as well. It's going to benefit you over the long term.
Yeah.
And so how do you create the buyer-sell network?
So usually the buyers will buy a business based on what they currently have within the portfolio. So say if someone's currently operating a solar business, it's unlikely they're going to go and buy a cup business, for example. What they're more likely to do is they're more likely to go and buy a complementary business on top of that. But as they start kind of building out that group, so say if they've got 2, 3, 4, 5 acquisitions all within the same kind of ecosystem, what they can then start to do is they can start to align the branding across all of the companies, which then creates a much more powerful brand, so that then if they wanted to exit to wherever, to private equity or whatever they wanted to do, they would sell that group as a whole, like so that they send essentially the brand as a whole, but each of the businesses kind of stand individually, if that makes sense. So like within each of these companies, they're operating under one brand with maybe certain systems that streamline everything operationally, but they all stand individually. So when buyers are looking to buy, yeah, you're right, they are looking to also sell at the same time. Because using the same example, if they had a solar business and a cup business, it's kind of hard to make those mash together from an exit perspective. So if they were to have an exit event, they would have to do those two things separately, because, an acquirer looking at those two businesses, they aren't going to want both. They're just going to want one or the other. So they're going to want to get it so that they get all of these complementary businesses, put them together, but then create a solidified brand over the top of it.
When it comes to networks, the buyer side, it's harder to find those guys that really want to invest in what they're building because they haven't started it from the very start. And if when you're starting the company, you're looking, who exactly are you seeking to serve? What's your minimum viable market? What's your niche? With this, it was easy. It was like founders. You're the guys that put the blood, sweat, tears, held your tongue to build that brand.
Yeah.
And then once you sell it, the difficulty that I'm having, and you could probably help me with this because you're much, much deeper into that, is that then it becomes a number. And so you've lost what it took to build it in the first place. Do you find that?
It depends on the company, doesn't it? So I think this is, again, what separates maybe a personal brand from a business brand. I feel like a business brand stays, like Nike, for example. You're not thinking about whoever, I don't even know who's running Nike right now, but whoever's running Nike right now, they leave Nike. Nike is still there, right? And I think that's one of the things that separates a personal brand from a business brand is the business brand stays with the business, in my opinion, no matter what. But the personal brand leaves with that person. So if you've got, let's say, a founder and they have an extremely strong personal brand, that's great for them as a person. But as soon as they leave said companies, that personal brand also gets taken away with them. So I think there's becoming, two kind of conversations to have there around brand.
Well, it's a very modern problem, isn't it? Everyone's being told to develop a personal brand.
Yeah.
But is it harming the business brand?
Well, this is it, isn't it? So, I mean, if the business, for whatever reason, starts developing its own brand, but the brand isn't necessarily something that the personal brand agrees with, then that can cause some friction there as well. So there is a lot of interesting conversations to have around those two, because sometimes they can butt heads.
Yeah. So how would you say you would avoid that for anyone listening that's building a personal brand and using it as a platform to start a business or run a business, I suppose, as far as networks are concerned? What would you say are some steps to make sure it doesn't conflict?
Well, I think the only time when it would conflict is if one of the brands starts getting some negative feedback. So say if the personal brand starts getting some negative feedback, the business brand is guilty by association, and vice versa. So I would say that that's the only time when it really, really matters in terms of the clash. But other than that, I feel like it's completely okay for a business brand and a personal brand to be together but separate at the same time, providing that they both got similar underlying values. So like, for example, again, I keep going back to solar business because I talked to him really recently. So one solar business, it was like a manufacturer, but their big thing around their brand was everything that is created was created ethically. Now, if the personal brand was kind of like really wasteful, talking about private jets and just being properly wasteful around everything and just couldn't give a behind about the environment, that might create a situation where those two brands aren't aligned. But for all intents and purposes, I think that so long as there's no kind of like negative associated with either of those brands, I think that they can coexist.
That's a tricky area.
It is,
because in solar and anything technology-wise,
the
materials that are being used, they come from a range of sources, often non-traceable. And so I think it's whoever this solar brand is, if I was to give advice, is to say, step back off that. Don't greenwash, because that's where you get your real audience clash.
Yeah.
If you say one thing and then, in fact, if
do
anyone,
another.
that can really harm you. It's better to say, look, we do our best, rather than everything is ethically sourced. Because
that's what they say. I mean, like when I saw it, I had a little question mark, but yeah, that's what they say. But yeah, I mean, brand is important, but I think it depends on which side of the table that you sit. I think that every business should have its own brand. I feel like it makes it more appealing for buyers, but I also feel like every founder individually should have their own personal brand, because there has to be something next.
And every business has a brand. It's just sometimes it's less obvious, and there's also a thing, I love it, I love counter signaling. So when you've actively decided, look, I'm all about this and I don't really care about that, same as this logo is done on paint. I did it
I remember you saying.
Did it as a point to prove, look, and it's the bane of all creator. I suppose you must have got that in as a marketing agency, but especially people with brand, and you hear about, I don't want my logo done. That is the last thing. But I think you either do or you don't. Like, I couldn't have started this without that symbol, symbol that's burnt into your brain that you're following, that makes you act a certain way. And I suppose that's the less obvious part. And at the moment, obviously, we're going through the great wealth transfer. It's been coined a previous
the silver tsunami.
Chris heard the silver tsunami. And it's a it's a good term. And we went off into boring brands and money makers, and infrastructurally they're really sound for society. But I just believe that this next wave is so much more keyed into brand and building personal brand, as well as business brands that become part of a ecosystem and network. It's a really hot topic at the moment, I think. Potentially. Now, I have some thoughts on this, actually, because
this whole silver tsunami thing is a thing, right? But I also have a thing, like, you don't have to be in your 60s
No.
to sell a business, right? There's a million different ways. So, I mean, I've exited my business, you know, I'm 28, so 27, 28, I don't even know. But, you know, I've already had one exit event, and a lot of the sellers that I also speak to, some of them are, a good chunk of them are kind of approaching retirement age, but I would say 60% aren't, 70% aren't. And they all want to exit for other reasons. There's a million and one reasons why somebody wants to exit a business, and age is just one of them. So yes, there is a huge opportunity there, but I also think that, especially from a buying perspective, there's a real narrative right now around, you know, those are the only kind of businesses to buy, when actually, you know, I mean, any business is buyable. Well, any business can potentially be bought, I suppose, in theory. You know, just because somebody is reaching, you know, retirement age in the back end of the careers doesn't mean that that's the only way to buy a business.
Yeah, I suppose it's the background number, isn't it? It's the amount of retirees.
Yeah.
And they kept these businesses, and the reason they started them in that sense was part of I want to say duty. Maybe that's a bit far, but you don't grow up wanting to start a sewage company.
No.
Do you see what I mean?
No. But I mean, the interesting thing with a lot of those businesses, and I think this is interesting where your take on brand is, you know, let's say like a sewage business or like a company that has a lot of like government contracts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, how important is brand to companies like that? Get it with marketing, get it with creative. I get it with a lot of industries, but does every business need brand?
I struggle with that a lot, and my example of that, whenever I thought about which companies don't need brands, is I went straight to, for example, you know how credit cards work? They just take 0.00% of each purchase, but it's like this tiny figure. But then you start to, and I messaged you the other day with this. I was drunk in Italy, and
I didn't know you were drunk.
When you were, I was well gone, but. When you have a brand in a boring industry or a place where you don't think it should be, you're a lighthouse in a village.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. It's beautiful. Yeah.
And it's the same with these credit card companies. So I was going, which can I use as an example of when you just don't need to? Because again, brand is, we're for you, we're not for you, we're not for you, we're not for you, we're not for you. And you take Visa, MasterCard, Amex. And then they're all doing the same thing. They're all credit cards. But Amex is the one that decided, you know, the little shops that say, we don't take Amex. You won't find someone with an Amex card in that shop.
No.
And when you whip out your black card, that's that's your signaling. And I suppose that's why we buy brands, especially young people, is that you're signaling a certain level of status.
Yeah.
And that's where you would think, boring industry, just fintech, nothing to do. But actually, you've got a section of brands where no one cares if they've got a Visa or MasterCard, but everyone wants. If you could have an American Express black, you know.
Yeah, you would do. Yeah. No, I get that. And I also think that, you know, I think something that people look at is businesses, especially from my perspective, you know, I'm much more aware of brand. So one of the things that I'm looking for when I'm buying is I can see when a company does have brand that it is more valuable, but I'm also interested in businesses that don't have brand yet, because as you know and I know, brand is valuable. So sometimes what I am actually counting on is the seller of a business to actually undervalue brand. Or also how I might be looking at it is, if I had a powerful business brand already and I had a company over here that didn't have a brand that I could acquire, and it could almost piggyback on the back of my brand, which will make my main brand stronger, but it will make that individual business stronger too. So I think there's a play there as well where, brand businesses with brand typically are more valuable and more. I wouldn't say more valuable. I would say more attractive. But there's also a play for businesses that don't have a brand, because someone that does value it can see how they can give, some instant stuff. Like I think a brand like this, I think of it like I quite often compare businesses to houses. So like, for example, if you have a house and it's a real, let's call it a doer-upper, and you go and you renovate that property, that's how me as a buyer, I'm thinking, which of these houses can I renovate and fix up? But where brand really comes into it is like the dressing of the house, so that then when it goes on to wherever, onto Rightmove or whatever it might be, the house is much more appealing. It doesn't have any like inherent value, but what it does have is it can start these bidding wars, and it can start being more attractive to people, which creates more demand, which will in turn create more value. So like the value isn't like inherent into what it is, but there is something it is almost intangible. It is almost intangible.
You're absolutely right. I've got a personal example of that actually, where, and I do this as well. The houses is so relatable, and it's a perfect example. Where my great aunt, she lived in a house that was part of the arts and crafts movement.
Yeah,
it's an architectural style.
Yeah,
and the guy comes through and goes, "This is X square feet. This is 2 bathrooms, 3 bedrooms, and therefore it's this."
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, you got the wrong person in.
You
got the wrong person in to value it. And if you just put it on Rightmove, and there's actually a company that does do this, where it's called the Modern House.
Yeah.
And what they've done is take architecturally significant people. All right, it doesn't add to square footage to have the fireplace that's downstairs.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But why was this built?
Yeah.
Who built it?
Yeah.
Who's owned it and who wants it? And that's where you start to create the demand. And you've just got to market brands to the right people.
Yeah.
And I was actually going to ask you about this. It's the difference between brand and marketing, and they're brother and sister. They need each other.
Yeah.
You don't have, again, if you market the wrong brand to the wrong people, then you've not got it.
Right.
There's no performance. There's no, and what defines it is that there's a pricing power, and there can be more good brands than the commodities. So you might get, for example, B&M. That's a commodity place.
Yeah.
That could be any shop
in
England. I don't care. I just know they've got the cheapest flowers. We're doing that.
Yeah.
Left with 2 trolleys worth of flowers.
Yeah.
Just love it. Know they're the cheapest.
Yeah.
But then there's other places that are much more efficient because they create a smaller section of demand for higher prices, and therefore they've got more clout. You don't have to be B&M.
Yeah. No.
Can you imagine the logistics behind them, and how many more are there like that? If you do it as a percentage, it's not a good bet.
No, there's not.
If you're building something, it's not a good bet to go on the commodities level unless you're. Well, the saying is, and this is from Seth Godin, is that it's a race to the bottom. If you compete on price, it's a race to the bottom, and the danger is you might win.
I love that. Yeah, and I think that having a brand takes you out of that. Because you are right, again, if we look at Nike, just using that as the same example, when you wear Nike, you feel that brand presence, whereas you might buy something that's maybe unbranded. It might be exactly the same material, same price potentially, but you don't get that same feeling when you've got it on. And I think that brands with a business, like businesses with a brand, that's what they pull, and then they can get out that race of, competing on price and that race to the bottom, like you say.
Yeah. Let's go back into deal flow. We've been talking so much about brand that we need to.
Deal flow is my favourite.
Yeah, we need to cover what your speciality is. So tell us how it works. I still don't fully understand it.
So I was saying, those that control deal flow control the market. Sometimes I say control the narrative. And I think that is true. You know, whoever is the person that has those deals and has the options to pick which ones they want to work with, they're the ones that are actually going to get the deals done. And that's what I specialize in. Sometimes we call it kissing frogs as well, because there is a big part of that. You've got to kiss a lot of frogs, especially if we're looking like off market, which is where I really specialize in and coming to my own.
Why?
Because if we're looking for a deal that's off market, usually the seller that I'm talking to, is kind of like, maybe I'm like one of, or maybe the only person that they've talked to around about exiting the business, which puts me in a good position as kind of like the authority and the credibility in how to exit your business. But also I want to try and get in there a little bit early, because I want to, I do want to try and control that narrative a little bit, in terms of setting expectations. So for example, if we look at an on-market opportunity, they've usually spoken to a broker, almost always, and almost always, not always, but almost always, that broker will have given, you know, said seller some sort of crazy valuation for the business. Not always crazy, but, you know, a valuation that is maybe slightly more than maybe what the seller was thought that they could achieve. From the seller's perspective, they're thinking, you know, oh great, you know, I thought that my business was worth £2 million. Oh, but they're saying it's worth 4 million. Now all of a sudden your expectation has gone from here to here. So, you know, if I come along and say £2 million, definitely I'm happy to pay that. Oh no, they said 4. All of a sudden I'm now trying to talk them down from 4. And it creates like a lot of friction, which I think is why a lot of deals don't get done as well. Whereas if you can kind of get upstream of where the brokers are and where, you know, these other people are, you can kind of get into these conversations early, and almost have first dibs as well. Because again, from a buyer's perspective, you do want to get away from these bidding wars and these frenzies.
Yeah.
Sounds
like negotiations.
Yeah, exactly. You want to try and get away from them as much as possible. Just because what you want to try and do is heighten your odds of actually acquiring that business, because it is a competitive space. But if you're the person that has the opportunities and the options, you can also look at things in a lot more black and white. You know, if you're looking at any one business, it's unlikely that that's going to be the business that you buy. It just is unlikely. So you've got to kind of heighten those chances of you acquiring a business by having simply more options. But then not only that, simply by having more options, you can look at deals in much more black and white. So say, for example, if you've got one deal, you're much more likely to be looking at that and thinking, oh, you know, there's some things there, but I really want to get this deal done. And you might overlook certain aspects. But then when you acquire that business, you're then inheriting all of those problems as well. So you might go, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done that, which is a conversation I have a lot with people. Whereas if you've got, say, 5 companies that you're also speaking to, you can start looking at things a lot more black and white. So these amber flags that start kind of cropping up, you can just go, nope, next one, on to the next one. And then you can just start to focus on those. So that's what I specialize in. So I specialize in giving people options. And once you've got options, you can choose where you want to go. And then if one deal doesn't work out, that's cool.
And so
move on.
The real effect on the industry is you're actually upping the success rate, aren't you, really?
100%. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. And like I say, you know, those that have deal flow, they're the ones that control, in this circumstance, the narrative, because they can say, right, okay, fine, no problem. I'll be over here then, because I've got these options over here. Yeah. If I didn't have deal flow, I wouldn't have that opportunity. I'd be like, no, it's fine. Let's talk about it. You know, it's fine. I'll come up on my valuation a little bit. Fine. So they control the narrative, but then they also potentially control the market as well. Because if you do have deal flow, again, it is a case of kissing frogs. So you are going to be kissing a lot of frogs, and that just is what it is. But if I kiss one frog, you know, I think it's a frog, but you might not. You might think it's your prince, which is absolutely great. But I can then figure out something where we might maybe joint venture on that acquisition, or we might even do a scenario where I have some sort of finder's fee in place, or I might even have something where, this opportunity over here, they're not quite ready for an exit. I mean, I'm not planning on doing this, but somewhere down the line, I might go, oh, I'm actually going to do a course on how to exit your business. It's not something for me today, but I might be able to regurgitate that and reuse it somewhere in the future. And I think that that's something that's really important about successful business buyers too, is, I don't know if this is a Lancashire thing, but I call it using the nose to the tail of the beast. Might be a Lancashire thing, I don't know. But using the nose to the tail of the beast basically just means that any opportunity that comes my way, I'm always thinking, right, how can I best use this? If it's not for this, it might be for this instead. And I think that's what real successful deal makers are doing, is, it's not something for this, but it's something for them. Or it's something for me, but maybe later on down the line. So they're actually making the most of every single opportunity. But that only comes with deal flow. If you don't have the deal flow, you don't have those options.
Exactly. A bit like they're effectively leads, aren't
they?
Yeah. How do you calculate ROI? Because it seems like it's so spread that you've mentioned so many different benefits to having deal flow. How do you then quantify that for the sellers, for the buyers? Sorry.
So the way that I quantify it is by essentially saying, all you need is one. All you need is one business. And then what you've put into deal flow. I did work it out once on a client that bought a £2 million EBITDA law firm. And I worked out they got something like a 200,000% ROI just because they bought one business, which then has covered the whole process and then the next however long of deal flow. So really, ROI in its typical form doesn't matter, because of course it matters. But what I'm trying to get people into the mindset of is, you've got to invest in your deal flow, but it literally just takes one business, one good business. Sometimes not even necessarily good businesses doing multiple millions. Just a business that's positive cash flow can be, the thing that gives you that positive ROI straight away. But if you're really interested in deal flow, you can be looking at 2, 3, 4, 5, in some cases 23 businesses, within a really short time period. So it's one of those things where it's really difficult to actually quantify in terms of ROI. So I just say, just think about the end result is you're looking for one business in a whole haystack of stuff. So you've just got to get in there and just start moving things around and start sifting through it.
And how do you find who you're looking for? So do you have a profile of company that your buyer is looking for? Like you said, they probably stick to the industry that they know.
Yeah.
How do you then find the different people, and how do you?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways of going about it really. So there's the sniper approach, and then there's more of like a shotgun approach, I call it, or like a rifle approach. Now both are fine and both work, but my personal grievance with the sniper approach is people become too reliant on it. So people think, right, every single business that we contact has to be like the one that we actually acquire. Mm-hmm. Whereas really the mindset that I want people to kind of get it more into is not like a shotgun approach in terms of you just spray everywhere, but you kind of go with a little bit more broad-minded, because there might be some complementary aspects into what you're doing. So again, using this same solar example, is we're actually in the process of buying a solar marketing company. Now, if we just went just only for solar businesses, then we probably wouldn't have actually caught them. But because we went a little bit more broad with the idea of kissing frogs and almost like a whittling down process, rather than the other way, I think that's a much more powerful way of doing it, instead of thinking, right, we're just going to contact these 4 or 5 people. Because, I mean, who's to know that those 4 or 5 people are even for sale anyway?
Yeah.
You might not do. But if you go to, let's say, 100, which again is a little bit more broad, you might get, let's call it 10 or 20 opportunities, which actually might be complementary to what you're doing at the moment. There might not be the main thing that you're looking for, but there might be something that's complementary that you can, again, then bring into your brand if it was. And then as you do start acquiring things that are more specific to what you are looking for, they can also complement those businesses too.
When you said we, you mean Mitton Ridge now?
Mitton Ridge Partners, yeah.
Yeah. I'm dying to learn more about it. We've talked a little bit in some of the basics, but just as an overview, what's the difference now that you've pinpointed?
So again, I always felt like I was the bridesmaid, never the bride. And I'm seeing these deals happen, seven figure, sometimes 8-figure deals that are happening, and I'm kind of like not really involved in those. I got the conversation moving in the first instance, and of course I'm really happy that they got those deals over the line. But I'd be a lot happier if I was actually in the deals themselves. So the idea with what we were doing before is, we're having these clients that pay a retainer, and we get them the conversations moving, and then we kind of step away from the process. And that was much more of a scale play, and kind of just like, let's work with as many people as we can to a degree. Whereas what I'm doing now is I'm actually limiting myself to the amount of people that I can work with, because I don't want clients, I want partners. And I think there's a very different relationship between the two, a client and a partner. Now with a partner, it's like, I'm on your side of the table, and together we're going to get these deals done. But what I need to know is, as a partner, I need to know that you've got the goods as well, because I can't work with just anybody and everybody. I've got to work with, a select amount of people that I know are going to get these deals done. So again, when I'm talking to potential partners, I do use the analogy of nose to tail of the beast. And it's just a case of, listen, whatever comes our way, we need to find very creative ways to get these deals done. So that's what I'm trying to achieve with Mitton Ridge Partners. But then the second thing that I'm trying to achieve with Mitton Ridge is I want my partners to focus on the portfolio and the growth of that portfolio. What I don't necessarily want them focusing on is the next deal. I've got that covered. I can find the next deal. I can get it. I can kill it. I can bring it in, and then I can put it on the table. And then it's down to the partners then to then cut it up and carve it up and do whatever they need to do with it. But then I focus on the next thing. And that's like the relationship that me and my partners have got. Because what they're looking for is companies that within their specialist field. Again, just using solar as another example. We're talking about that a lot today. But let's say solar, for an example, they're specialists in that field. I'm not a solar guy. I don't know how to run a solar business necessarily. So what I want my partners to do is I want them to cover that headspace of running those companies and those portfolios.
Is one of the partners solar?
Yeah, believe it or not. Yeah. Which is why I'm talking about it so much, because obviously that's for one of my partners. Like I've been on loads of calls today with solar businesses and stuff.
And are partners business entities under this kind of partnership, or are they individual people?
So there will be Mitton Ridge, and then there will be the partners company, and then there'll be an SPV that we both co-own, special purpose vehicle, and then we both own that company, both equal partners within that, and then that's the company that we buy said businesses within. So if we were to then exit together at a later date,
is this individually or as a group?
So each partner will own their businesses individually, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So each of my partners will have an acquisition target in mind, and those will be if we can call it an acquisition engine, I suppose. Each partner has its different acquisition engine. So like we've got one that's targeting marketing companies, one's targeting solar, one's targeting precision engineering, for example. So we have all of these different acquisition engines that are active for those partners, and then whatever comes out of those specific engines are for those partners.
Okay. And do the partners know about each other? Is there strength in numbers in that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's an absolute player there. So if there's for example, a bigger deal that's on the table that needs two partners, let's say, in order to get that deal done, then yeah, absolutely, I would say you and you, let's get together and then let's get this business together. And then again, that would just be a case of all of us would then have equity within that business. But again, this is why I'm being really selective around who I'm partnering with, because I do want people that are in the mindset of collaboration and working together And ultimately, so long as the deals get done, let's just get them done. However we need to do it, however we need to get it, let's just get it done.
Yeah. You know what I love about talking to you about this is that you're like glowing.
I love it.
Yeah. It's just, and I suppose that's one of the biggest things. It really plays on my mind as to why people don't want to sell. And I think there's a fear in that where you it's the dread of wanting to start again, but you're just not the same beast. You're a real, you built on experience, and now you're doing something that's likely going to be even bigger. You know, you're going through that whole process again. So how are you feeling at the moment? That's one of my big questions. I love
it. I actually feel leveled up. I'm more leveled up than anything else.
Yeah.
Because I can see like the very clear kind of like, I suppose at least in my stage of my career in M&A, you know, I'm kind of like going up the rungs of the ladder. So each time I do something, it's another rung, it's another rung, it's another rung. So like I never go down the rungs, or at least I haven't yet anyway. But I'm not going down in rungs, I'm going up in rungs. So, you know, I don't know if that's a perspective thing or whatever, because like I said, I'm not part of this M&A advisory anymore. But actually the skill set that I gained within that is actually a level up, because now I actually have the skill sets to get deals done. Whereas before, I was really good at finding the deals and saying there's somebody over here that's created some intent and they might be interested in the conversation. But because I wasn't involved in actually getting those deals done and over the line, I kind of wasn't ready to be what I'm doing now. But then having that exposure within that M&A advisory, and then also, you know, I've developed relationships with clients within that company, which now has led me to, you know, for example, some partners that have now partnered with me, and they know the whole narrative, they know the whole story, and like I say, together we're getting deals done. Yeah. So like I say, it's a complete level up.
You've graduated from a founder to an entrepreneur.
Yeah, actually, yeah. So I've gone from a founder to a shareholder to an entrepreneur. It's kind of the progression that I've gone there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a common story with all those people. You know, you get inspired, and I suppose it's part of the byproduct of social media and things like that. But these are the types of people we cling to, are these success stories, these business, especially when you're business orientated. You tend to. My one thing I always think of people like Scott Galloway. Have you come across Scott? He's basically, he made his experience and now what he's teaching, plus his money, by building and selling businesses.
Yeah,
it's such a common thread through all these people who have really hit that. And some people don't want to go there, I know, but it just seems to me like once you've done your first one, then
it's a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's a real rabbit hole, and I think that once you realise that actually there aren't any stabilizers, you know, and there aren't rails that you actually need to walk in between, you know, once you actually realise they can come down, you start looking around and you start going, whoa, there's actually loads that I can do here. And that's definitely been the realisation that I've had. And I even have it, you know, every day recently I've been having it where I'm having these conversations. I'm like, absolutely mind blown. Like I say, it's such a rabbit hole. And it is really one of those situations where it's just like, not the world's your oyster, because I feel like that's really cliche, but it does become one of those things where you actually do the first one and you think, oh, then show me. And then you just, you know, that's literally all it is. And once you start actually realizing that is what it is, everything just seems like, see, your horizons just broaden so much more. It's crazy.
Yeah. That starting point, I suppose it's a bit like a train, isn't it? Where it takes so much force and energy to start. But once you go in, you're 400 tons going at 200 miles an hour. And it's really the momentum, but you got to get off the train.
You do have to eventually get off the train, because there is going to be a point where you're going to need to get off. And I also think with momentum, especially if momentum is only going to build, there's going to be a stage where that momentum is too fast for what maybe you're geared up for.
Yeah.
So I think that, especially for me, because this is how I've always thought about it before I got into this, was, I'm going to be the next Elon Musk or whatever. And it's kind of just like, well, actually, let's actually look at that and look at what's involved in what it is that they want to do. I mean, I'm no Elon Musk. I know that 100%. And I don't want to be that either. So like, I kind of know the lane, I suppose, or should I say the limitations of what I can do as an individual. So I think I've kind of got to a stage where I know where, as that train is picking up momentum, I kind of know where my off point would be, and then somebody else would hop on, and then they can then move forward from there. If we keep using that analogy, someone that would get on after me, for example, they wouldn't be able to operate below where my momentum is. And again, like I say, this is a real rabbit hole, because there are always people that are like bigger than you. And there'll always be people that will say, yeah, we'll take over from here. And then you just go, yeah, sweet, no problem, you take over.
Yeah. Staying on the analogy still, I think it's also important where that train was going in the first place. Otherwise, you wouldn't have built the train. You wouldn't have got off the train, and someone else wouldn't have got on, because it's going somewhere. And so I think that's where we could probably give some advice here. Actually, if I'm a founder and I want to sell my business one day, just keeping that in mind, what are the main things that you think they should do? Let's talk small business right now.
Mm-hmm. So, from a brand perspective, or just anything?
I'm open.
Well, from a small business perspective, the most important thing is just cash flow. So long as a business has cash flow, a brand can be built on top of that. But what people aren't necessarily buying, and what is difficult to sell, is just the brand just on its own. So, for example, like, people will know this if they've ever tried to do like a pre-seed round raises, or they're just trying to raise money before they've actually a pre-revenue or pre-profit. Like, it's a real slog, because they're very, very, very heavily reliant on brand. Not saying that it's impossible; people do it all the time, but it's much harder to come at it that way than it would be. Again, we're talking small business perspective, right?
Really.
So as a small business, I would be thinking just cash flow, and whatever you need to do to get those clients or customers or whatever is whatever you need to do. Whether you need to go out on the street and hold up a big sign and say, "Please work with me," and that's it. That's what you need to do.
Yeah.
And then the brand, I think, comes maybe a little later. I think that's the way that a small business should approach it. So another saying that I've got is output equals input. The more output that you have, and this also comes into play with deal flow as well. The more output that you've got, the more kind of feelers that you're putting out there, the more input you'll receive as well, just naturally. So I think as a small business, you've got to think about what is your output, and can you have more output? Start doing that, get the cash flow, and then when it starts to be at a stage where not cash flow is comfortable, but you've got almost like that reliant cash flow, that's when you can start building a brand on top of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, one of the things I've always battled with is the initial stages, and I like coining the term taking small steps in the right direction, so that you can take big leaps in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And the cash flow part is, I've always asked, how do you generate the cash flow if you don't know where you're going? Do you see what I mean? Is it picking industry? Is it picking product? Is it piggybacking? Is it opening a well-versed street cart first if you want to own a restaurant in the end? Mm-hmm. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, how do you...
Well, again, like I say, we're talking small business here, aren't we? So more people that start small businesses will have this almost like light bulb moment, but it's got, someone should do that. Oh, we'll do that then. Yeah. So usually the direction is, this is a thing that people should do, and I'm going to occupy that space. For, like I said, purely small business perspective, that's usually how businesses get started. is they're just thinking, you know, this is a great idea. In theory, let's see who wants to buy onto this idea. But then I think once you start getting some bites, you'll start noticing certain trends of things that people are looking for and reasons why they want to work with you. And then that's where I think, right, so people work with you because blah, 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 blah. And then you can start building a brand on top of that.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's jump up to the next level. So we're now in the millions. We're a mid-sized company. What do we do to scale up and exit?
Yeah. So if you were a company, let's say you're doing 2-3 million a year, by that point, you will somewhat naturally be somewhat known just already. Again, let's just assume that company doesn't have a brand. Some of the first things that I would be doing, in my opinion, is I would be doing things like customer surveys. I would be reaching out to customers and essentially saying, why are you working with us? You know, what are the reasons? And then once you've got those, you'll start to create like a bit of a matrix of why people are working with you. And then that would then be the bedrock of, right, these are our almost core values within our business. And then that would be what you would create around your brand. Because something else as well that I've noticed is when companies do kind of breach that level, they go through a whole rebrand. And it's almost like a big rebirth, because that's exactly what they've done. They've actually gone, right, well, we were here, which was fine, and it was just output versus input, output and input, and we were just go. But now what we want to start doing is we're going to start thinking about the actual brand itself in terms of like the legacy and what this company actually represents. And like I said, that's why people then start initiating into rebrands and then positioning themselves as, you know, we are the best in this field, but we've also got, you know, the track record to prove it. So yeah, I think that there's almost always there's a big rebrand.
Yeah, rebrands are a hot topic at the moment as well, and they're quite a sensitive topic. You've got to be dead careful. You could be getting rid of something that built you.
Yeah.
You know, but then also like Jaguar Land Rover, that's been the hardest topic out in the branding world. And there's a great podcast who's Uncensored CMO, right, with one of the main people behind it, and he just explains it in a way that is like obviously, and where it really resonated with me was, do you remember the Land Rover Defenders?
Yep.
The old school ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. When the new ones came out.
I personally don't like the new ones.
You just still don't like them?
No, when they first came out.
My heart sunk me. I was like, what have they done? And then I loved them. They're top of my list.
I still prefer an old one.
Oh, of course. Don't get me wrong.
I still prefer an old one personally. But I do see what you're saying. It did take like a little bit of adjustment. You know, on the same thing, I also had the exact same process when the Evoques, the Range Rover Evoques, when they came out, because like the roof was kind of like, it was kind of like slanted, and when they first came out, I thought they're absolutely disgusting. Cut to, however many years later, you know, I had one, and I was like, I love this car, it's brilliant. I feel like an absolute king on the road. So yeah, I think there is an element of adjustment with brand, but you are right. I think
they did it in a clever sense. So they did it through product development. And remember that Land Rover as an English brand is just massive. So they were touching with something that was deep in all of our hearts, kind of thing. And they tested the water. But what they did was double the price point.
Right.
If this is all a numbers game, what they did was double the price point. They could make half the car. And now with what Jaguar's going through, so they plan to electrify it, for example. Well, if these were some of the biggest engines back in the day, and the E-Series, they shocked the world before, and people forgot that. They needed to shock the world again, so they've just done it in a way that isn't obvious on face value, and it caused a stir. But in the end, I think they'll be absolutely fine. And we're talking obviously billions here, so we've probably made that jump. What's the price range that you work around as far as Mitton Ridge? Is there a range?
So the people that I work with aren't interested in obviously proper startups. But I think once a company starts breaching maybe a £6 or £7 million price tag, that's maybe when some of my partners will start to jump off. So like we usually sit between like that 1 to maybe 5 mil price tag. It's usually in and around not revenue. No. So revenue wise, it could be anything between, let's call it probably on the low end, maybe like 750k revenue would be on the real low end. On the high end, you know, if you start breaching into the multiple millions in terms of revenue, obviously that becomes really attractive to us. And also what I find with revenue is, especially with conversations that I've been having, is once they do kind of start breaching those 2, 3, 4 mil revenues, is almost ironically the deals actually become somewhat easier to think, right, how are we actually going to finance this? Because there's a lot more meat on the bones and things that you can leverage. Whereas if it's a really small company, you know, there aren't as many things that you can cling on to for leverage. So, you know, actually these smaller deals are sometimes harder to do, and they also typically carry more risk than the slightly bigger ones. But yeah, that's roughly where we sit. You know, if the company was doing, let's say, 10 mil in revenue, I would probably be saying, I think maybe this is a bit bigger than what we're currently set up to do, but anything maybe in and around that.
Then you start bringing them.
Again, yeah, this is what I'm saying, you know, the whole like North Tales of the Beast, but, you know, if one of those opportunities came along, I'm not saying that we would turn it away, we definitely wouldn't. We'd try and find a way to make that deal work, but just in terms of where our scope is, you know, we're not like that, and we're just going after anything and everything, but we're also not super toxic like this. We're kind of like I say, that shotgun/rifle approach is kind of where we're going.
Well, it seems everything that we've talked about so far is built on understanding what works and what doesn't. So what are buyers getting wrong still?
I think one of the really big things, and this is just something that I've experienced from even being in the M&A advisory, was if you aren't a likable person, it's very likely that somebody's going to sell the business to you. Because, you know, if you're buying this from someone, likely it's been bought from startup position and it's somebody's baby. And if they aren't going to trust you with their baby, then it's going to be an uphill struggle straight off the bat. So I think that's thing one. I think thing number two would be, I do think that, especially with the kind of businesses that I typically will be looking to acquire, they still need some work. You know, I think that there's a narrative at the moment where you can buy a business for no money or next to no money, and it requires like almost zero amount of time. Where actually it's almost always the flip case. The less money that you need putting up front is because there's a lot of work that needs to go into it.
Yeah.
Whereas if there's a business, you know, if you have the capital, usually those are the businesses that will require less time and effort in terms of sweat equity. So I think that's where people are going wrong. Where people are going right is in the first initial call, you either qualify or disqualify on that one call. So you've got to kind of have like questions ready to go. And if you can get some questions in advance answered, then great. But usually, on that first call, you should get a very good understanding of whether or not this deal has even potential legs in it or not. Because otherwise, you're going to be sitting on 2, 3, 4 calls, loads of back and forths, and it's just going to be a complete waste of time. And I think that's where people are going right in terms of, you know, disqualified straight away. But because, especially my clients, because they've got options, they can. They just go, right, you know, there isn't anything that we can do with that, or we can very quickly say, there's something that we can do with that, but it goes in that pile. I think you need to ascertain that very quickly on the first call. If you can do that, then the deal flow that you've got coming in is only going to work in your favour.
What are sellers getting wrong?
They don't know their cash flow is a big one.
In what sense?
They don't know kind of like when they're next being paid. So like, again, this is just, it's so simple, but I'll say something like, do you do cash flow forecasting? they're like, no. And it's just like, well, how can I be positive and reassured with whatever it is that you're saying? You know, when you don't actually know what it is that you're next being paid, and you don't know how your cash flow is going to look in the next few weeks, never mind the next few months. If you can't actually say, you know, this is what our cash flow forecast looks like, it's not necessarily something that sellers are doing wrong per se, but it's a really big red flag, especially from my perspective. Another thing that sellers are typically doing wrong is that before a sale, they're starting to drain the money, drain the business of cash. So one situation is this company that we're still in talks with, but they had around about £1 million cash in the bank. Now, on first glance, great. You know, we can use that and we can leverage that. And in terms of the acquisition, we can actually help that business owner to extract that cash as well, in a way that is kind of like tax efficient. But instead, they pretty much withdrew all of that cash from the business, but they took it as like a dividend, which is like one of the most ineffective ways to do it. But they would have been taxed just an absolute bomb. Simply because they just started withdrawing the cash out of the bank. But then it also made it a more difficult acquisition to make as well.
In this circumstance, they had already shaken hands.
In this circumstance, no. In this circumstance, no. So this has all happened before we've shaken hands properly.
They've shot themselves in the foot.
They not only shot themselves in the foot because they've still got a business that is good, but it's made it much more difficult to acquire for one, but then also the amount of money that owner is now going to receive is actually going to be less.
Yeah.
So in the long run, it's actually worked out not as favourable for them. So I think there's something else that sellers, particularly, are doing, not necessarily wrong, but something that makes more attractive is brand. You know, if I'm looking at a company and it does have that kind of look and feel about it, it does make it more of an attractive proposition, even if the financials are the same as any other company.
Yeah.
Is there any other trends that you see happening in the industry?
In terms of brand, or just in terms of anything?
Just in terms of anything.
I mean, we've got the AI chart. Do you want to get into that?
How much time we got?
I know.
Yeah. Probably not a lot.
Probably get into that if you want. We'll take another few hours.
Well, right, go on.
Here's my thing on
let's
AI.
jump in.
Here's my thing on AI. Great, of course. But I think that, especially for sellers, and sellers that I speak to that are interested in AI, is they're almost too reliant on it in a way.
Yeah.
AI is great. I use AI every single day, but I'm very intentional with the way that I use it. In the case of whatever it's going to give me, I always see it in black and whites, and it leverages my time, but it always needs me to put my own little colour onto whatever is being put out. Whereas I think that a lot of people have just been solely reliant on AI and just going, yep, cool, and then that's it. But it just saps everything out of what it is that you're trying to achieve.
You're automating yourself out of existence, eh?
Yeah. So I think automate what you're doing and leverage what you're doing, but just don't rely on it.
Yeah. I think
One of my big points with the AI boom is that it's making businesses so much more prevalent. They're so much easier to start because you can get so much more done in a space of time, which, if that compounds, will be flooding the market. And there was a quote to say, you know, brand is dead because of AI. They're weapons of mass diligence, basically. But this is the whole point: is that when there's more, brand makes them pick you.
Yeah.
And AI's got to pick someone. It's not going to deliver you if you give it a prompt to say, look, I need to find camera companies at this level in this country, then it's going to only give you 3.
Yeah.
You know, unless you want 20, but then now you're starting to go into
Exactly.
Google,
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And so it's actually bringing things more to the forefront, I feel, and because of these native platforms in which AI is developed, a lot of them are just feeding off of that. So does it actually give your company any more inherent value because you've automated it? You know, I'm not.
I think it's useful for decreasing overheads in some circumstances, and again increasing efficiency too. But to rely on it, and build your whole business around AI, I don't think the tech is there just yet. I think it probably will get there, but as of right now, people might say otherwise. But just from what I've seen, the companies that are overly reliant on AI, they're actually almost shooting themselves in the foot, and they also lose any kind of personality or anything that they had about them in the first place too.
Rory Sutherland tells a story about how there's almost like a consultancy efficiency obsession.
Yeah.
And the perfect example is the getting rid of the door.
Yeah.
So on paper, the automatic door. And let's say it's an AI automatic door, and it gets to have a conversation with you. That's the level that we're going into at the moment, isn't it? But what you've done is you've got rid of the person that signals the hospitality of the place, and by getting rid of him, the person that remembers the names of the big people that come through, the regulars.
Yeah.
Once you get rid of that, you've actually lost money. So I think you've got to be really, really careful. In that sense, and so, for founders in your shoes, being young and acquired, what's your one biggest piece of advice?
My biggest piece of advice is personal brand, especially as a young entrepreneur. I wish I actually invested in my personal brand sooner. Because that personal brand then follows you wherever it is that you end up, into whatever you end up doing. So I would say personal brand, or the business brand. In the first instance, anyway, get that down, get that nailed, and then think business brands.
Perfect. Danny, this one was a personal one for me as well, because I remember when I started going to these M&A events and briefly spoke to you. You killed it on stage, came up after and said you're onto something. So I've been dying to get you on. It's been really important to me. So thank you.
Love it, man. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, man.
I love it.
If this was valuable to you and you want to see more, then subscribe. You obviously. We could use that.
Thank you for watching. Bam, right. This is about you. You want to see more? Go ahead and subscribe.